So tonight, people will have a chance to come and look at the corridor. We've had images out before of the vehicles, but now we have a bid for those vehicles, and so they'll be able to see what those vehicles look like from the company that we're working with to get those vehicles. They'll have a chance to see exactly where the tracks will be located along the route. So if you're a property owner along the route, you'll be able to see how the tracks might relate to your property. They'll also be able to talk with people from the utilities, with people from Kiewit who are doing the construction. So they'll be able to find out what the work will be in terms of utilities in front of their businesses and along the route. Find out what the schedule would be for when that work will take place. And so they'll also, if they have just general questions about the urban core, how the streetcar fits into all of the development that we're looking at in the urban core, there are people that can talk about that. There will also be people here if they have questions about financing. We can talk about financing and how we're paying for the streetcar through the use of the property and development from within that district. So there are a lot of things that they can learn if they come to the meeting tonight.
So from my understanding, you are more on the financial side of the streetcar development, correct?
Sure. I work on a lot of aspects of it, but tonight I'll be there to help answer some of the financing questions.
What's the main takeaway that you want people to know as they're coming in and asking you questions, whether they've been at one of these meetings before or maybe this is their first one? What do you want that main takeaway to be for people?
Well, I think, what I hope people see is and learn is what it is we're trying to accomplish with the streetcar. I think oftentimes people don't understand that what we really are after is finding ways to really maximize and increase the level of development in the urban core. We've had about 50% of the land in the urban core is now devoted to some form of parking, and about 50% of that parking sits vacant at any given point in time. So we have projections for new housing, for office space, for retail space, and so forth, and what the demand will be in the urban core. But when we have looked at that, how we place that demand on the ground, what we've found is it doesn't fit if we continue to park things the way we have. So in order to accommodate all of the growth that we have coming to the urban core, we have to change the way we operate in the urban core and how we park in the urban core. And that's really where the streetcar comes in. So I hope they come away with an understanding that if you don't own property in the urban core, if you're not a commercial or multifamily residential property owner in the urban core, you're not paying for the streetcar. And I hope they learn about the real intent of the streetcar, why it is we're doing the project.
Sorry, just taking notes. What are some of the main questions at past meetings that you've been getting from community members, not just in terms of financials, but in all of it? What are some of those common reoccurring questions that you get from community members?
Yeah, I mean, the most common question is people want to know if they're paying for the streetcar. That's the most common question. And I think they are often surprised when they find out that they really aren't. The way we're financing it is not using any city tax dollars. We're not doing any kind of a property tax levy increase or anything like that. So I think that's always a surprise to them. I think people are also just curious about how it operates. The fact that it is tracks in the ground and it's a permanent installation, and how that changes development patterns. I think they're just curious too what it might look like. They'll probably be curious about what the vehicle maintenance facility looks like, what the vehicles look like, what do the stops look like. And so they'll be able to see those images here tonight too. So I think all of those things, and then we'll have some people who will have questions about cycling, and we have a bikeway right now that was a pilot project. We have identified where that will be located once we get into the construction with the streetcar. So we may have some people come tonight and be curious about how the bikeway might change and how that's being accommodated in the project. We'll have a lot of people, I think, who own property in the core along the corridor who will really want to know how it affects their business. And I think tonight will be a great opportunity for them to learn about that.
So the last public meeting was back in November, and the design phase was only 30% done. You've made a big jump to 60%. What would be the biggest change that people who maybe are going to both meetings can expect to see tonight?
Well, at the 30%, we still were at the stage of thinking about, are there some options as to where the tracks are located? And we had possible options in how we might run things. We were still even thinking at the early stages about, could we run it all on Farnham Street, or do we run on Farnham and Harney, and some of those kinds of questions. So we've answered that now. We'll be on one-way pair, westbound on Farnham and eastbound on Harney, and then running two-way through Blackstone. So we've answered a lot of those questions. The other thing we didn't know at the 30% stage was we were unclear as exactly what it was that UNMC might want in terms of extension. They were thinking maybe they would extend it at some point in time and it would go south on 42nd Street. They also were looking at extending it over to the steel casting site. They were still kind of thinking about how they were working on their campus. So we kind of, at this stage, we've kind of decided to stop at 39th Street while we work with them on what the extension might look like. They're getting closer to really having a pretty good idea of exactly what they want to do, and so we'll then be able to extend it once that decision is made, and we'll be able to figure out how to do that. We also did something similar on the other end, along 10th Street. We had a stop location on 10th Street right in front of CHI, but we heard a lot of people ask about extending it to Millward Commons, maybe extending it to Gallup, maybe extending it all the way to the airport. If we did that, we wouldn't put the stop where we had it, so we decided to step back, just stop right now at 10th and Capitol and really take a look at that extension and decide, well, if we're going to extend, what would that stop look like and how should we do it, so that we're not building something that we later throw away. So that's another thing that people will see tonight, those two changes.
So there was a stop proposed in front of the CHI Health Center, and now it's just going to stop at 10th and Capitol.
Right.
For potential future plans, you don't want to put a stop where you might have to take it up.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's set up and designed so that it can be extended. We just, but it was always also set up so that it could just stop and cut off at that point. So there are things, you know, we do the same thing at Turner Boulevard. We have a cutoff so that if for some reason there's a problem west of Turner Boulevard, you can cut off at Turner Boulevard and just loop back and sort of shortcut that route. So you do that kind of thing. So we always had that built in at 10th and Capitol. So for now, we just decided to do the stop that's there and then study that for future extension.
So this is changeable if you get feedback you might not be expecting.
At this point, in terms of changes, if we get feedback, I think, you know, tonight, because we're all the way to 60% design, the kinds of changes are probably going to be more in terms of phasing and how do we work with property owners to make sure that we accommodate their needs. And so, you know, maybe there'll be some changes in terms of how the utility work gets done, how the track gets put down, how we work with those property owners to ensure that they can continue to operate and aren't disrupted by the streetcar. So really tonight is a good opportunity for them to begin that conversation. And the changes then would be, you know, more of a slight change and more of a change in terms of schedule and construction as opposed to design.
So I was wondering about at the end near UNMC. So does ending it at 39th Street change the cost formulation at all?
Well, sure. By shortening the tracks, the initial cost will be a little less than it would have been if we had extended it. But, you know, as we've said from the beginning, we had initial cost estimates based on just what was called 0% design or a conceptual design. We always knew that the cost of the streetcar would be more than that. That's why we asked the City Council for authorization for a higher level of bonds, so that we felt that we would be safe in being able to cover the costs. And the other thing that we've always wanted to do is we are tracking as development occurs. We're tracking to make sure that we are getting the revenue that we need in order to be able to pay for the bonds. So yes, in a short run, it would reduce the cost because we wouldn't build that section of track. Ultimately, when we go on to build that section of track, that cost will come back.
And is UNMC being expected to bear a part of that cost when happens? Or
Yeah, that will all be part of a conversation with UNMC. There may be some opportunities for cost savings if they're doing work on their next project next. They may be doing some work in the right-of-way, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to work together. Maybe they're doing some utility work. If it's done in a certain way, it saves money for the streetcar. Maybe we're doing something with the streetcar that would help save them money. So yeah, the idea would be to work together to really try to be efficient in what we do.
and is the UNMC portion, is that, are they working on a time schedule? Have you said to them, okay, let us know by such and such a date, or is that just out at some indeterminate time?
Yeah, I mean, they are working on a schedule. I can't tell you, that I'm not the expert on what that schedule is, but I can tell you that folks in City Hall are working with them on a regular basis and meet on a regular basis so that we can make sure that we're coordinating all of this. And so, yes, we're talking with them. We're trying to make sure we understand what they're doing, and we're looking for how that might be extended down the road.
And just, I know one of the things that people have had a hard time believing is that this could be paid for without any city taxes. Can you explain again how the financing works and why it is that it won't require tax increase?
Sure. So a couple things. What we see across the country, and what we anticipated seeing here, and what we are seeing here, is that because of the permanency of the tracks, developers and lenders make different decisions. And so what we have seen historically in the urban core is that because, and nothing against buses, I don't want this to make it sound like something against buses, because it's not, but because buses are flexible, what happens with the developer and with the lender is they say, well, the bus might be here today, but it might change routes. So what we'll do is we'll build parking so that we're able to support our project regardless of what happens with the bus. And so what that has meant is, as I said earlier, we've reached the point where we have almost half of the developable land in downtown devoted to parking. And then at any given point in the day, half of that parking is vacant. So you go to an office building and parking there is busy during the day, during the week, and it's empty on the weekends. You go to the old market, it's not very busy during the daytime hours, morning hours, but in the evening and weekends it's busy. So what we do in downtown is what we've always done, which is drive from one place to another in downtown. So what we see across the country is that because streetcar tracks are permanent, developers and lenders are willing to make different decisions. So what you see, for example, with the new Mutual Tower is the building they're building could house 4,000 people, but they're only building 2,200 parking stalls. And the reason is that there are other parking stalls along the route of the streetcar that if they do ever decide and fill the building with 4,000 people, they don't need to have 4,000 parking stalls. They can share the parking that is along the route. We're seeing the same thing with developers that are coming in. We're seeing all of those developers lower their parking ratios from what they did before. Now, what happens with that then is there is a lot more land that gets freed up. And so when we look at the projections, we see a potential for 30,000 jobs, 30,000 residents over a 30-year period. But if you were to park that the same way we park things today, we would need to spend $50 billion on parking. And so we would spend so much money on we'd need 50,000 parking stalls. Let me fix that. About $1.5 billion in parking costs. But the problem is that parking wouldn't pay for itself. And so what then happens is the city ends up subsidizing that parking. So you end up with taxpayers subsidizing all of those 50,000 parking stalls. And then what's also bad is that those 50,000 parking stalls will consume 40 square blocks of land. And that 40 square blocks will pay nothing in taxes. But on the same 40 square blocks, we could put another $2 billion worth of development that does pay taxes. So part of what this is all about is how do we efficiently use the land we have in downtown to build bigger buildings and buildings at a higher value. And when we do that, then there is more revenue that comes in terms of tax revenue, and it's that extra tax revenue that we are capturing to use to pay for the streetcar.
With the hours currently, it's kind of restricted to not hospital expanding there, but if there's special events like CWS or just events at CHI in general, is there a regular plan to have hours extended or shows, or is that set cutoff every day? Because that does create kind of a fluctuation in daily schedule if you're planning around events, but also restricts what kind of traffic can come on a regular day.
Sure, and right now we haven't gotten to the details of the operations. But what we're planning around right now is operating from roughly 6 in the morning until about midnight, maybe later on the weekends. And so that's kind of the general range right now. But that'll be, we'll be working on that over the next few years and really kind of refining that breakdown. But yes, if you have an event, the idea would be to run it later. I know a few years ago at the College World Series, there were a whole bunch of people downtown that something ran late, and then all of a sudden everybody wants an Uber at the same time. So yeah, I mean, trying to make sure that we keep it running to help with events.
And so I just wanted to go back a little bit to, so what you're counting on is needing lots of parking downtown, and that's presumably because people would be taking the streetcar or some other way to commute to work?
It's a combination of things, and so that it isn't so much, now certainly if you live downtown and work downtown, so what we're seeing, for example, at the Mercantile is that out of the first, I think 100 to 120 apartments that they leased out, about 10% of those went to people who were new to Omaha, but who were working at the Med Center. And so that's a perfect example of somebody who then, lives at the Mercantile and then works at the Med Center. They'll take the streetcar back and forth. So because of that, there's only one parking stall if they have a car needed at their residence. So that's one way that we cut down. I think another way, though, is that, as I said, you use multiple parking stalls in downtown as it is today. So if you work in City Hall, like I do, and you were going to the Creighton game the other night with UConn, what you would do is you would get in your car at City Hall, maybe meet somebody in the old market, and have something to eat or have a beer, and so you'd find another parking stall in the old market, and then you go to the game, and maybe I'll just drive over to the game and have another parking stall. So you use 3 parking stalls. If the streetcar was there, I would just leave my car at City Hall, take the streetcar down to the old market, take the streetcar to the game, get back on the streetcar, go back to my car, go home. So that's another way that it reduces the number of stalls. So I think, it's really a packaging kind of thing as well, because part of it is operating the parking together so that if we can offset, share the parking, just like turning tables at a restaurant, if we can use the same parking stall more than once. So by having residential and office sort of in the same areas, they're off-peak with each other, we can share the parking. So it's a whole package of things, but the streetcar is a piece of it.